This video is sponsored by Delete Me. A sleek stealth aircraft rumbles down the runway at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. Everything appears normal inside the cockpit. Captain Justin Grieve notices a warning light flickering. Before he can react, it vanishes. Just a momentary glitch, or so it seems. The aircraft lifts off, but something is wrong. The aircraft refuses to climb. Grieve's pulse spikes. He later said, quote, "We didn't have control of anything. We were along for the ride." Then the B-2 begins veering left and pitching up. The wing tilts dangerously, inches from slamming into the ground. There's no way to recover. Grieve makes his decision, quote, "It felt like the plane was going to crash. I remember looking at my hands and saying, 'You've got to be kidding me.' I put my head back, closed my eyes, and pulled as hard as I could." Even the B-2, one of the most advanced aircrafts on the planet, faced a devastating disaster due to the tiniest oversight. In the same way, even the smallest misstep online is enough for data brokers to silently collect and sell your personal information without you knowing it. That's why today's sponsor, Delete Me, is essential. Data brokers gather your sensitive details, like your address, phone number, relatives, and online activities. This isn't just annoying, it can expose you to identity theft, phishing scams, or harassment linked to your public information. Just like the pilots of the B-2, when you realize something is wrong, it's often too late. At Dark Footage, we trust Delete Me to guard our privacy. Our dedicated privacy experts track down and remove your personal data from hundreds of data broker websites year-round. Our Delete Me dashboard clearly showed just how many sites had our personal details, and Delete Me quickly scrubbed them clean, keeping us protected continuously. Plus, Delete Me understands that safeguarding your family's data is equally important, so they offer family plans to ensure your entire crew remains secure from unwanted exposure. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Click the link in the description and use promo code DARKFOOTAGE to get 20% off your Delete Me subscription. Privacy should never be compromised. Equip yourself with digital stealth. A giant burns. On December 10th, 2022, the crew aboard the B-2 Spirit, one of the rarest bombers in the U.S. Air Force arsenal, were suddenly confronted with a storm of critical warnings flashing across their control panels. The aircraft was experiencing a mid-flight malfunction. With only seconds to come up with a plan, the crew prepared for an emergency landing. Keeping their calm amid the crisis, the pilots guided the bat-like bomber onto the runway, engaging in a rushed landing. The crew barely had time to escape before flames engulfed the malfunctioning aircraft. Emergency responders rushed to the burning wreckage, fighting to save the billion-dollar aircraft, one of the most expensive ever built. While full details of the incident remained classified, the damage was later confirmed to be extreme. Following the accident, the entire B-2 fleet was grounded for 5 months. The cost of repairs was deemed too high. By mid-2024, the Air Force confirmed that this rare and irreplaceable aircraft would be officially and permanently retired, further reducing the number of an already endangered fleet, leaving only 19 operational B-2s available to the air defense. However, the loss of B-2 number 20 was not the worst disaster to strike this legendary aircraft. 14 years earlier, the eyes of the entire U.S. military were fixated on an airfield halfway across the world. A B-2 was destroyed in the most expensive aircraft crash in history. The Invisible Bomber. For decades, the B-2 Spirit had seemed untouchable. Despite a shrinking fleet, going from 132 to just 21 aircraft due to budget cuts, not a single bomber had been lost. No crash, no operational failure. Even in extreme conditions, the B-2 had maintained its perfect record. From its inception, the B-2 was engineered for the impossible. Thanks to its radar-absorbing body, the bombers were nearly invisible to enemy detection, allowing them to infiltrate deep into Soviet airspace and deliver nuclear devastation in the event of war. With a combat range exceeding 6,000 miles and virtually unlimited reach when assisted by mid-air refueling, there was no place on Earth beyond its grasp. To America's enemies, this was a nightmare, an invisible attacker from which there was no hiding. Capable of carrying up to 50,000 pounds of munitions, the B-2 could unleash precision-guided bombs, nuclear warheads, and even the 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator, a weapon specifically designed to destroy underground facilities. From the moment it entered service, the B-2 was treated as America's ultimate strategic asset, sent into every major U.S. conflict since the late 1990s. During Operation Allied Force in 1999, B-2s flew 30-hour round-trip missions from Missouri to Yugoslavia, delivering one-third of all bombs dropped in the first 8 weeks of the Kosovo War, a feat no other aircraft could match. By 2008, the B-2's record was spotless. Then, the unthinkable happened. Uncharted territory. In the early 2000s, the U.S. Air Force launched the Continuous Bomber Presence Program, designed to position America's toughest bombers within striking distance of rising threats in the Pacific. At Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, B-52s, B-1Bs, and B-2s lined up on the runways, pointing toward China and North Korea, ready to launch an attack in response to any sign of aggression. The B-2 Spirit rotated in and out of Guam, remaining deployed for months before returning to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Among the aircraft assigned to the mission was Spirit of Kansas, a seasoned veteran of the fleet, belonging to the 509th Bomb Wing with over 5,100 flight hours logged. Despite the impressive track record of the B-2s arriving at Guam, they all faced a difficult challenge. The intense humidity of Guam's tropical rainforest began to seep into the aircraft's most sensitive components. Its ability to maintain precise flight control was compromised. Maintenance crews quickly identified the problem: moisture buildup in the port transducer units. The sensors responsible for calculating airspeed and altitude were throwing back inaccurate readings, leaving the B-2's flight control system operating blind. Mechanics at Andersen reached out to Northrop Grumman, the aircraft's manufacturer, seeking solutions, but there were none. The bombers were simply not built for prolonged exposure in tropical climates. With no immediate fixes from the manufacturer, personnel at Andersen were forced to improvise. They discovered that by activating the Pitot heat system, a feature originally intended to prevent icing at high altitudes, they could dry out the sensors before takeoff, restoring accurate data readings and preventing miscalculations. But this workaround was never formally documented. It remained a verbal fix, known only to a few technicians. Most crews operating the B-2 were never made aware of the aircraft system failures, much less how to apply the fix to them. A lethal oversight. As Spirit of Kansas began its pre-flight routine on the morning of February 23, 2008, its two-man flight crew, Major Ryan Link and Captain Justin Grieve, prepared for departure. An alert flashed on their displays, reading Air Data Cal. This was an indication that the air data system needed calibration before takeoff. The men on board followed their checklists and assumed the issue was resolved. But one crucial step was missing. The Pitot heater remained off. Moisture had reached the port transducer units, causing 23 out of 24 units to provide faulty data. The aircraft's altimeter miscalculated its elevation, reading 136 feet higher than the airfield level, which neither man noticed. An hour passed, and the Pitot heater was finally activated. As the moisture evaporated, the faulty sensors recalibrated. However, the damage was done, and the aircraft's flight control system was now working with wrong airspeed and altitude readings. At 10:30 a.m., the Spirit of Kansas taxied onto the runway, preparing for takeoff. Then, a final warning. The master caution light signaled that something was wrong. Major Link and Captain Grieve hesitated. The thought of aborting takeoff crossed their minds. But just 6 seconds later, the caution light vanished. The crew saw no further active warnings. The displays showed green across the board. Everything appeared normal. Investigators later determined that the master caution light disappeared due to a flaw in the flight control system's logic. The B-2 relies on 4 independent flight computers to analyze airspeed, altitude, and angle of attack. Initially, 2 of these computers detected a discrepancy in data, recognizing that their values did not match the other 2. However, as the aircraft accelerated down the runway, the system forced the 2 conflicting computers to sync with the incorrect values. Spirit of Kansas lifted off the runway. The aircraft's instrument showed an airspeed of 142 knots, but in reality, this value was between 132 and 134 knots. The flight control system misinterpreted the false air data and calculated a negative angle of attack, believing the aircraft's nose was pointed downward, even though it was actually level. In response, the system automatically corrected with a 30-degree nose-up pitch at an altitude of just 30 feet. The aircraft stalled instantly. The end for Spirit of Kansas. Captain Justin Grieve turned to his co-pilot, Major Ryan Link, only to see the same confusion across his face. He later recalled, quote, "As soon as the plane did something that I knew Link wasn't doing, I said, we gotta get out." Not every pilot would have reasoned that ejecting from a billion-dollar bomber barely hovering above the runway was a viable alternative, but Grieve's fast thinking saved both their lives. As the men activated their ejection seats, the left wing of the B-2 scraped against the tarmac, sending a fireball tearing across the runway. The aircraft cartwheeled uncontrollably, disintegrating on impact. The explosion engulfed 200,000 square feet, with the wreckage burning for over 8 hours as fire crews battled the flames, with the cost of the crash's damage escalating up to $1.4 billion. Despite the low-altitude ejection, both pilots miraculously survived. Major Link escaped only with minor injuries, while Captain Grieve suffered a broken back upon landing. It took him months to recover, but eventually he returned to the cockpit. Sometime later, Grieve reunited with the technician who packed his parachute, Staff Sergeant Genevieve Simmons. The weight of the moment was not lost on either of them. Simmons later said, quote, "When a plane goes down, you don't hear about a good ejection very often." That day, the U.S. Air Force lost one of its most valuable bombers, triggering a wave of high-level investigations across multiple government agencies to determine what went wrong and how flight crews could prevent a tragedy like this from ever happening again. The entire B-2 fleet was grounded, but after months of safety reviews, the stealth bombers were cleared to fly again. For years after the Spirit of Kansas disaster, no other B-2 was lost until 2024. Special thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. Protect yourself from hidden threats online and reclaim your privacy. Click the link below and use promo code DARKFOOTAGE to get 20% off. Stay stealthy, stay secure. Activate Delete Me today.